It was supposed to be a cabinet expansion, ended up being a significant cabinet reshuffle with several portfolios being changed. This is a performance appraisal. Is this a reshuffle that has the stamp of Prime Minister Modi in it? How are we to read this reshuffle really? Joining us are three very special panelists on this special telecast right here on ET Now. Dileep Padgaonkar, Saba Naqvi and Gurcharan. Thank you so much, all of you, for being with us here on ET Now. Dileep Padgaonkar, I'm going to start off with you. It was meant to be a cabinet expansion. Just a day before this, we had the Prime Minister state that it's nothing more than a cabinet expansion, and it ended up being a significant reshuffle. I'm sure the tremors are still being felt in parts of Lutyens, Delhi. How do you read this reshuffle really?
Well, the morning expansion was more a matter of political calculations in view of the forthcoming elections, particularly in UP and Gujarat. But the latter reshuffle was really a matter of governance. And I think we should keep in mind that there were two simultaneous exercises being undertaken by the Prime Minister and by the BJP chief Amit Shah. In the morning, if you remember, the consensus on your program was there's really, one shouldn't read very much into this, it's unlikely to have an impact and so on and so forth. But I think the tone of the commentators changed completely by the end of the day. My own reading was, in the morning, it was a pure political election driven exercise, but by the end of the day, it was the Prime Minister asserting his primacy as far as governance is concerned.
Saba, comment on that, and we are going to speak of each of those high-profile ministries where there's been a rejig, but without getting to the specifics of that, your take, does it seem like a reshuffle that's been prompted by performance alone, or have there been other considerations at play here?
Are you asking me?
That's right.
Okay, first of all, I think the most significant takeaway is naturally the so-called demotion of Smriti Irani from the HRD ministry. That cannot be ignored. She was, there are three important points I'd like to make from years of covering the BJP. Mr. Prakash Javadekar, who now replaces her in the HRD ministry, is an old BJP hand. He's been around for years. He came from the Bombay BJP. He was close to Pramod Mahajan. He was around in the days of Atal Bihari Vajpayee, also in the party. I remember him being with L.K. Advani during one of his many Rath Yatras. He's an old BJP hand. He's a very courteous, pleasant kind of a man. He's not somebody that I would associate with enormous talent, but he's not the kind of person who would offend anyone. Now, Smriti Irani, on the other hand, was the most high-profile minister who was seen to represent this new BJP that came into power in 2014 at the swearing-in at Rashtrapati Bhavan. She was the one who everybody's eyes were on her. She was seen as this sort of the face of the Modi government, the new Mahila face of the BJP. And now 2 years have gone past. And clearly now, but where Smriti Irani had, I think, made a lot of mistakes besides the public scandals that she got involved in, the sort of incidents that happened, her handling of various issues. I don't think we have time to get into all of that. And she put off people outside the party, but the most significant thing is she put off people within the party and the larger parivar. She cultivated the RSS, yes, she did, but she put off many colleagues with her high-handedness and her manner of speaking, and I'm sure all those reports were taken back to Prime Minister Narendra Modi. So her demotion is significant. The other thing, now you have Mr. Venkaiah Naidu, another old hand of the BJP. In the INB ministry, even though parliamentary affairs has been taken away from him and given to Anand Kumar. Anand Kumar, another old hand of the BJP, goes back to the days of the Vajpayee-Advani BJP. He will now be Parliamentary Affairs Minister along with S.S. Ahluwalia, both of whom have contacts across parties. Now there are, in the BJP there is a sort of small group of people who have this kind of contacts within other parties, both of whom have that. Both of whom have, Mr. Anand Kumar has certainly in his days been involved in controversy, but he's an old hand politician. He's an old style politician. So you've had an assessment within the party that Mr. Venkaiah Naidu was not doing well as the Parliamentary Affairs Minister. So to that extent, he has been moved to he still retains, I think, urban development, but he gets INB. And so these are some of the important changes. Parliamentary affairs is important because the session is round the corner. So, but of course, the most important change is Smriti Irani.
Just to interrupt
I'll
you,
add one more thing.
I'm going to get to.
I'll just add one more thing.
Sure. Go ahead.
No, I just want to add that out of the whole galaxy of people who have been brought in, there's one thing that we must note. Punjab also has elections. It's not just Uttar Pradesh. There is actually no one from Punjab who's been brought in. So I wonder, has the BJP written its hands off Punjab? Or do they have no people? How can that be? So how can a national party, the preeminent party, they don't have a single person from Punjab?
Fair point.
It's all focus on UP. In the matter of UP, please note the keep your eyes peeled on Anupriya, who's been brought in from Apna Dal. I think she will be one of the leaders who will be projected in a very, very big way as we run up to the assembly elections in 2017.
Fair point. I thought we'll dive into Smriti Irani and Venkaiah Naidu and Jayant Sinha. I've got a question on that as well. But now that we've approached the contentious reshuffle of Smriti Irani, that's the big headline. You look at any newspaper, that's the big headline. Gurcharan Das, come in on that. How are we to read this? I know there's this theory doing the rounds in Delhi that she hasn't actually been demoted and that she's being prepared for possible, candidate as a UP chief ministerial candidate. I find that hard to believe. But how are you reading into this reshuffle that we've seen in a crucial ministry like HRD, where the consensus view is that the ministry has underperformed?
Well, that's exactly right. And frankly, I'm less interested in the politics of all this. I'm much more interested in performance. And I have been associated with education for almost 20 years. And I must say that India has not been lucky with its education HRD ministers. And Smriti Irani was clearly one of the worst that we've had. And the fact of the matter is that education is in crisis in our country. India was last, 8 out of 80 countries. It was 79 in the PISA results that were done some years ago. And the answer of the ministry was to stop doing this international test so that we could compare our children with the rest of the world. And the fact of the matter is that we have to change the whole strategy in education from quantity to quality to outcomes and these things. And I used to hear people from PMO who had good ideas. They were totally rejected by Smriti Irani. I think in her case it was very tragic because her arrogance was really a function of her insecurities, her lack of confidence. And it was reflected in a very poor kind of behavior that we saw. But it's not the behavior ultimately, it's the results that matter. And she set such a low bar, unlike other ministers. Unlike even, I'm delighted that Prakash is coming into this portfolio because he at least listens. He listens, he has a pulse on the key issues that are involved. And I don't think he is going to be captured either by the HRD ministry, because that's been a problem, that HRD ministry tends to capture the ministers, scares the hell out of them. And where we need a major change now in our direction, both with regard to higher education and primary education. And finally, let me say, Smriti is going into a ministry, the textile ministry. I hope she doesn't go too demoralized, because the government a couple of weeks ago announced a very important policy. Actually, if you think about India's priority, it is jobs. And the biggest single creator of jobs, industrial jobs, is garments and textiles. And so if over there, if she can just help in implementing that policy, that would be a great achievement, I think, for her, and to particularly pick up her sagging spirits today.
Dileep Padgaonkar, I know there's much that we can talk about Smriti Irani, but Prakash Javadekar as well. Is this also a signal that the Prime Minister is sending that at the end of the day, he's going to reward silent performers? Prakash Javadekar role in the climate change talks, probably went unnoticed. He didn't get the kind of attention that Smriti Irani was getting from the media. Is this a signal from the Prime Minister that he is going to reward silent performers, people who are not going to get into a controversy every other day, and that he wants people who are going to put their head down and work? Is that the broader signal, you think? Dileep Padgaonkar, that was for you.
Oh, well, no, I have a slightly different take on this. You see, the fact of the matter is that Prakash Javadekar proved to be a quick learner in the ministry, the Environment Ministry. I think the Prime Minister appreciated the role he played in the Paris Conference. There were certain undertakings that were given by the Prime Minister to President Obama about ratifying that agreement, and I think Prakash Javadekar has seen to it that all the preparations for the ratification have been made. But secondly, as you quite rightly said, the silent performers, those who don't thrust themselves forward, those who don't speak out of turn, these are the kind of people that endear themselves to the Prime Minister. I just have to make one comment inspired by what Saba Naqvi just said, that if Smriti Irani was shunted out because she was confrontationist, because she courted controversy over controversy, it's still surprising that the Prime Minister didn't think it fit to drop at least 3 of his cabinet ministers who have been making hugely provocative statements in the past. And this is worrisome because Smriti Irani might have made all kinds of comments and acted in a brazen manner in many ways, but I don't remember her making a single commonly charged comment as some of our other cabinet ministers did. So it's a question mark. Why is it that he didn't move against, let us say, someone like Sakshi Maharaj, Giraj Singh, and so on and so forth? So that's one question. As far as Prakash Javadekar is concerned, let me tell you that there will be more a change of tone of the minister and the ministry than a change in the substance of what was done. I think there is a great deal of clarity in the BJP of what national education ought to be. There will be now discussions on the national education policy, which alas did not take place because Smriti Irani refused to make public the TSR Subramaniam report. But I believe that Prakash Javadekar will seek a consensus within Parliament and outside. He will reach out to a large number of people who've been engaged in the field of education, and we might perhaps have a better balanced, a more comprehensive report. I mean, that would be among his very first responsibilities. The other, of course, is that there are a large number of vacancies in higher education which have not been filled, vice chancellors, for example. That he'll have to attend to. The question is, as far as Prakash Javadekar is concerned, is will he put in these positions people known more for their loyalty to a certain brand of ideology, or will he also take into account the scholarly credentials and the administrative abilities of these people?
Fair enough. Okay, let's shift focus away from Smriti Irani. I know she's in the spotlight today. Saba Naqvi, someone who's tracked the BJP, tell us what explains this shunting out of Jayant Sinha from the Finance Ministry. Is the Prime Minister, in a way, also trying to send a signal to Finance Minister Jaitley himself to focus more on the ministry? Because one would have thought that at the time when you don't have Governor Rajan as well, in a few months from now, Jayant was seen as an able colleague assisting Arun Jaitley. That we didn't hear any reports of the two of them having any differences as such. So what explains this move of Jayant Sinha moving him away from finance to aviation?
I myself have not heard any reports of any friction. In fact, I believe Jayant was handling things quite ably. He was considered an able minister. So I cannot actually give you the answer to your direct question, but there has been some suggestion in some website pieces that Mr. Jaitley is being cut to size, but I'm not sure how much we can read into that, because Mr. Jaitley was one of the there were 3 people, in the know about the reshuffle. One was, of course, Amit Shah's imprints are very much there, and I think Mr. Jaitley was consulted on a lot of things. This kind of political speculation gets into the realm of things because there are certain people who have also got portfolios who are not close to him. But let's not forget one thing, that when the first government was sworn in, when 2014, when there was it was far too, when Narendra Modi was a newcomer to Delhi, there were far too many people, the whole cabinet, there was far too much of an imprint of Mr. Jaitley. There were many people who were known to be loyal and extremely close to him, who were brought in as MOSs, the younger generation. Many of them are still there, and some of them have been rewarded to an extent. And you know, none of them have actually been dropped, unlike the speculation. And so I think he still remains a very powerful figure in the government, and I think all that speculation that he's somehow you know, and I think he, in his own way, he works very closely with Mr. Modi. But the question of balance, yes, this is power, this is power in Delhi, and there is a slight shift in balance within the cabinet. About a point that Dileep made earlier, I entirely agree with him, but I'd just like to point out that there is a gentleman called Mr. Kateria, who was one of the BJP MPs from Uttar Pradesh who had a MOS position. He has been dropped. He is also one of those who made blatantly communal statements just a few months ago. But there are others who are very happily retained: Mahesh Sharma, Sanjeev Balyan, Sangeet Som. You know, so in fact, the Uttar Pradesh election, in spite of all of this, it's very clear from my own sources, and BJP guys are pretty open about it, it is going to be on a hard Hindutva line. So, you know, it's a calibration of caste and Hindutva. I mean, that is the view, because none of those, and they're all ministers of state. Sanjeev Balyan, the MP from Muzaffarnagar, Sangeet Som, I mean, there's so many names. Sakshi Maharaj is not a minister, Yogi Adityanath is not, but these are important, and Sadhvi Niranjana is there also. I think she is still, I'm not sure, we need to check that whether she retains she has a MOS position also.
Right.
So these were the kind, and she's the kind of woman who made the kind of statement we can't repeat on television. I wouldn't like to in a program like this.
Sure.
But so we still have people like that around. So we shouldn't overread it. But yes, one such individual has been dropped.
Right, one such individual has been dropped. Gurcharan Das, I'm just, you know, I know this is largely a political exercise, but I'm going to try and steer it as much to the broader economic, you know, impact, so to say, as well. Gurcharan Das, would you say that the big disappointment has been the move to shift Jayant away from the Finance Ministry to the Aviation Ministry, just as MOS? It's not even as if he's been given MOS with independent charge, because you would know it and you'd agree that Jayant now is probably one of the few economic liberals in this government. The fact that here was someone who had the right pedigree, understanding of complex financial issues, and whose thinking was of an economic liberal. So to that extent, would this go down as a big disappointment?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you, and it's a real shame. It's a real shame at a time when Rajan is also leaving. It's a real shame that another liberal, plus somebody who actually did a damn good job. You know, he used to step in to the breach when Jaitley was occupied with other things, and he did a great deal to calm the markets, especially investors were very concerned with the question of retrospective taxation, and Jayant played an excellent role at that time. And plus, he's a very competent man. We have not had many ministers in finance with that kind of competence and background. And so I personally think this is a terrible thing that has happened. I mean, I'm happy that Prakash has come in at HRD, but I am also very unhappy with the loss of Jayant Sinha. The job in finance was a very big one. It's a growing one. And frankly, I don't understand it. I don't understand it. He had, who was his enemy? Who was behind this? It's a loss. This guy. You know, this cabinet is, Modi's government is not filled with a lot of talent, and he was one of the real talents. So just as we lost a talent we are losing a talent in Rajan, we are going to lose a talent. We have lost a talent in Jayant Sinha.
Yeah, and one wonders what impact this will have on the entire bank, on the NPA mess, because he's been spearheading a lot of those reforms in the banking sector. But Dileep Padgaonkar, I asked this to Saba as well, and your view, is this a signal to Jaitley? Is this an attempt to cut him to size? Because the sense that one got was that he was seen as an aide of Jaitley, or is he being made to pay the price for some of the comments made by Yashwant Sinha, his father, which obviously didn't go down too well with the political establishment?
It will be a worse shame if the father's sins are visited on the son. You see, I completely endorse what Gurcharan has been saying. Jayant has been one of the most outstanding young ministers of this government. He has performed exceedingly well. I, for one, simply do not understand why he had to be shunted out. I don't buy the theory that it was done in any way to cut Arun Jaitley down to size. I think if you see the kind of 2 new MOSs that have been appointed under him, it only goes to show that if anything in the finance ministry, now that Arun Jaitley has also shared an important portfolio like INB, Arun Jaitley's hands will in fact be strengthened. But had they kept Jayant there, I think the team, these two, would have done extremely well. So I think Jayant's leaving is not at all a good signal as far as the corporate world is concerned. In fact, I'm wondering, while I'm delighted that Prakash Javadekar has been given a cabinet rank. I mean, let's not forget, he comes from Pune, where I now live. I would have thought that if you really wanted to send a bigger signal that the government is determined to keep steady pace on the path of economic development and social development, then there were at least 2 or 3 other ministers who needed to be elevated. I frankly thought that among them would be someone, say, like Piyush Goyal or Nirmala Sitharaman, for example. That hasn't happened. And again, it's a mystery. Why did that not happen? They performed creditably in the past 2 years, both within the country and in international fora. So, there are a lot of question marks about the expansion at dawn and reshuffle at dusk. And on both these counts, I'd say there are many more questions this raises than answers.
I like the way you put it, expansion at dawn and reshuffle at dusk. Piyush Goyal, one would say, is being given something more. Mines Ministry with independent charge has also been given to him. So probably I will call him as one of the winners of this reshuffle exercise. But Saba, one quick word on Jayant Sinha, because it also helps you read the mind of the Prime Minister. And if you see in the context of what happened with Governor Rajan, it's almost as if that at the end of the day, this government and this leadership will reward people who are low profile, grassroots level workers, the kind of people who've replaced Jayant in the finance ministry as ministers of state, not these high profile, for lack of a better word, foreign bred, pedigreed, the kind of leaders that we at ET now would like to see the government promote. That's not going to catch the fancy of the leadership. Is that a fair assessment?
It's interesting what you say, and you could have a point there, because I'll just tell you a little bit about one of the MOSs who I've repeatedly met and covered, the new one, Mr. Santosh Gangwar. He's a many 5 terms or 6-term MP from Bareilly. So he's a sort of hardcore BJP politician who actually wins elections. He's hung on to that seat somehow. I think, the exact, but many term MP from Bareilly in Uttar Pradesh, but not someone that I would associate with some great ideas about finance, not trained in the manner in which Jayant Sinha was. So yes, I mean, there is a question that you have there. He's a homespun guy from the backwaters of Uttar Pradesh, let's just put it that way. And all credit to him, he's been around, he's been a low-key performer, but he is now one of the MOSs in finance. I am not familiar with the other gentleman who gets in, I don't know him. But Jayant Sinha certainly was trained, equipped, he was liked by people, he was good in speaking to the media also. He would speak out after a controversy, he would give selective interviews. So yes, you have a point there about that. And about Prakash, since we're all singing praises of him, because Prakash is an extremely likable person, and we are calling him low-key, but let's not forget Prakash has handled the media for years. He's been one of the party's spokespersons, And the good thing that he will bring to the table is that whether you're ideologically with him or against him, he does not have a hostile air about him. He is extremely pleasant and homespun. But is that enough? I mean, when we are talking education, as Mr. Gurcharan Das rightly said, it's one of the areas which is so badly managed and ignored in India. Is that enough? You know, that's it. I mean, I like Prakash. We all like Venkaiah Naidu. He's a very pleasant guy. But we are talking about talent, competence, all these things. So let's just watch. And yes, the Jayant Sinha thing is a question mark right now. Yes.
Okay, let's quickly focus on
of course, the BJP will turn around. Just one point.
Sure.
They'll turn around and say we've given him independent charge of civil aviation, and that's an important
Sabah, they haven't.
And we want to.
No, just to correct you, they haven't given him independent charge.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Ashok Gajapati Raju is still the aviation minister. If they'd given independent charge, we would have been okay with it, but that hasn't happened. But Ravi Shankar Prasad.
So sorry, I got that wrong.
No problem. Ravi Shankar Prasad, the other high-profile minister, Dileep Padgaonkar, one would say that he's been demoted because telecom was the meaty portfolio which has been taken away from him and given to Manoj Sinha. He gets law in return, retains electronics and IT. It is no secret that he didn't get along well with the industry. It is no secret that consumers were unhappy. He was called the call drop minister as well. How are we to read this? Has he been demoted, or is he kind of neutral at the end of this exercise?
Well, listen, I tend to look at this really again from the perspective of Amit Shah's and Mr. Modi's general approach to the electorate. If there are complaints, as you've just said, from consumers, for example, these call drops and so on, and the minister was unable to fix any of this for the past several months, then you know that there is this instant rage on the social media. The number of mobile users increasing the way they have, and this is, this again is very interesting new constituency of mobile owners, the social media and so on. And if you are going to alienate them with this constant business of call dropping and overbilling and so on and so forth, so someone had to be brought to account on this, and I think probably one of the reasons for Mr. Prasad being moved out could be that. But again, I don't see that as a demotion, because Mr. Prasad has been a very fine lawyer. He's been extremely well versed in the finer points of jurisprudence, and I think he will probably do much better in the law ministry than he would have over the next 2 years. So perhaps you will see that as a demotion. I see this rather as a light reprimand, but also as a sign of confidence that he can bring all his luminous legal talents and deploy them in the ministry to which he now has charge.
Gurcharan Das, Manoj Sinha is the new telecom minister. Not a very important ministry considering the stakes involved. We're looking at spectrum auctions in a few months from now. Some of the biggest corporate leaders are in this sector, whether, you name them and they're all there. They all have stakes in the telecom sector. Manoj Sinha as a telecom minister, a bit of an unknown entity, would you say? Or do you think this is a signal that this is a ministry also that will be largely controlled by the PMO? Because that's the sense that one gets if you look at how they've handled lesser important economic ministries. How are you reading into the move as far as telecoms is concerned?
Well, I mean, I agree with Dileep that Ravi Shankar Prasad is a good lawyer, and his moving to the law ministry is a good thing, and the area of telecom, and he had done a good job in telecom. I think the most important thing was not the call drop issue. I think that's where social media really completely throws you out of the loop of the country's priorities. The main and the fact is it's something that the call drop issue is something that has to be worked slowly together with industry and that. So the performance of Ravi Shankar Prasad, I think, was fine. It was nothing. He was, if anything, he was a little too obsessed with the call drops. There were other things. They brought the auctions. Also, he did control the TRAI. because TRAI had, had a, I don't know whether you remember, but TRAI had a very dangerous proposal which would have brought penalties, jail sentences to executives of companies, etc. And that was totally, that would have really damaged India's reputation. And fortunately, that was stopped. I don't know whether it was stopped by the PMO or whether it was stopped by Prasad, but clearly it was stopped. Anyway, as you see overall, the situation, the new man, I don't know him at all, and it would not be a bad thing if you have a new person who is, because the PMO is by and large, I have seen good ideas flowing from the PMO, sensible things that need to be done, and if they follow some of those things. That was the problem with Irani. She was not listening at all to the PMO, and she was caught up in her own world. Anyway, now we're going forward. I think if you take the overall look, clearly we have a loss in Jayant Sinha, we have a gain in Prakash Javadekar, and we have I would say a neutral with regard to Ravi Shankar Prasad. And as far as Smriti Irani, I still want to say that she's put in a position where she can do a lot of good, and that is textiles, particularly at a time when jobs is the crying need for the country. And this is the sector with the new policy, which is clearly one of the best policies I have seen. It could really make a big difference to India's competitiveness, and this is one sector where really we can get jobs for the country. So let's hope.
Okay, let me get closing. Let me get closing comments from all my panelists. Saba, I'll start with you. And again, I'm just trying to, I'm trying to read probably too much into this exercise. But is this also a signal that from the PMO that it wants greater control of these crucial economic ministries? If you see this in context of the cabinet that took charge in 2014 as well, key economic ministries were given to relatively low-profile ministers. Look at who was doing commerce in the UPA, or telecom under the UPA. Look at look at now, right? Petroleum, for example, when the UPA was in power, you have Dharmendra Pradhan as a petroleum minister. You have and now Anil Dave as the environment minister. Manoj Sinha as a telecom minister. Is this a move to ensure that there's greater control of these crucial economic ministries within the PMO, and is that necessarily a good thing?
I mean, I'm sure that's part of it, although they've always had control of everything. Just to enlighten you a little bit about Manoj Sinha, he's someone also from Uttar Pradesh who nobody knows very well, but his name was floated some months ago as a possible CM candidate also within the BJP circles. So he's another person from the state of Uttar Pradesh, of Bhumihar caste. Anyway, this is not the place to get into all of this, but so low-key, unknown sort of individual. Now he has this ministry. To your question, look, this is a very highly centralized sort of regime. You don't have these hugely independent ministers as you did in UPA. You had who appeared to be autonomous at times. You had those powerfully, very talented, controversial people in the UPA. You still have, I mean, there is a shortage of talent here that Mr. Modi is playing with, and so we do. I mean, they're not very impressive people. I think I'm being quite objective over here, and I think that's something, and it is about control. Everything is ultimately in this government is controlled by the PMO.
Closing comments from you.
I don't think.
Sure. Closing comments from you, Dileep Padgaonkar. What's the big picture looking like? What does this entire exercise add up to? Do we have more talent in the cabinet than we had 2 days ago? Has this been done with an eye on the 2019 polls? What does this all add up to, according to you, Dileep Padgaonkar?
It adds up to two basic questions that are going to haunt us over the next 2 years until the next round of general elections. The first is whether this hugely presidential Prime Minister will be able to remove the hurdles in both legislative and otherwise in the paths of speedy economic growth and development, leading to creating more jobs, leading to a good control on inflation, particularly on food prices? And the second question is, will this Prime Minister, who now really controls virtually every string in the government, be in a position to ensure that social peace and harmony are not disturbed because of the communalization of the electorate? I think on these two questions, we will be able to judge whether the cabinet expansion and reshuffle really matter, because I don't really think that he has the luxury now to go in for a third expansion and a third reshuffle between now and the next general elections.
That's a big statement you're making. Unlikely to see a significant reshuffle. This is it. This is Modi 2.0, and this is the cabinet that we'll have to live with. Gurcharan Das, I'll let you have the last word. And I know the obsession is a lot with reshuffle today, not so much with expansion. But in a sense, do you now see that this whole talk of minimum government, maximum governance is a bit of a joke, really, because this clearly doesn't look like a minimum government for sure.
Well, that doesn't really bother me. The reality is ultimately minimum governance, maximum governance is what we are going to have to see on the ground. And whether it can be achieved through weak ministers and a strong PMO or the other way around, matters much less. What matters is performance. And frankly, for the last few years, I have been very impressed with the ideas that have been coming from the PMO to the ministries. I've always agreed, in fact, personally with those ideas, and it's very good that some of those ideas got implemented. Now the problem, as I mentioned earlier, was in HRD there was no responsiveness from those ideas, which were very good ideas, all the key things that I talked about earlier. So we should not worry too much about the size of the cabinet. We should not worry about things like whether the PMO has too much control. The issue ultimately is, as Dileep said, are we going to get the jobs? Are we going to keep the inflation under control? And this is why. And are we going to are we going to keep the voices of communalism under check? Now, that is why Modi got elected. And he has to deliver that. And all the rest really is secondary to that.
Summed it up perfectly there, as long as he delivers on the promise that he's made to the electorate, and hopefully this is a team that will allow him to deliver. Let's hope for the best. Saba Naqvi, Gurcharan Das, Dileep Padgaonkar, thank you so much for taking time out and joining us in this special telecast right here on ET Now. Thanks for watching.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/etnow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at etnowlive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/etnow.